panel debate around remote production. I'm delighted to be joined on the stage to my left by Alison Abbott from Pebble, from Rajesh Patel from Mediaproxy, from Russell Johnson at Hitomi, and of course, Duncan Beattie from GB Labs. Welcome, everyone. So we're just going to start off by running you through a quick presentation that my colleagues at the Business Intelligence Unit have put together for us around decentralized production models. So bear with us while we click through this, he said. Here we go. So this slide is really showing the top investment categories for each part of IABM's BAM content chain model. So down the left-hand side, you can see the 9 elements of the content chain, starting with create at the top and support at the bottom. And along the green column, you can see where the top investment category is. I'm going to spin through this because we want to get to the debate, but if anyone wants a copy of the presentation, they can see me afterwards. So as this quite rightly states, this is a simplistic view of remote production investment. What I'd like to mention here is that live sport in the APAC region moved to remote production because of the pandemic. I'm told it will stay with remote production due to the huge cost savings, especially as ad revenues have not bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. So for this presentation and for the purposes of my commentary, when I talk about remote production, I'm really talking about production for live events and sporting events. That's how we would see it. I don't know what to do next. Thanks. What you can see here is the fact that the move to remote production is also driving investment in cloud-based services. John. Thank you. This is from Gordon Castle when he spoke at BAM Live in March. And it's nice for us, at least, at the IABM to see new suppliers with cloud-native tools like Blackbird are coming onto the scene. Thanks, John. This slide shows the relationship between spend levels and investment when companies are focusing on implementing and developing a workflow ecosystem. So what you can see here is that the workflow ecosystem of remote production is having an impact across the store and connect elements of the value chain. Thanks, John. As usual in broadcast and media, the larger suppliers have the scale and funding to acquire other suppliers already active in parts of the value chain that are popular. And as you can see, the acquisitions that have happened recently there. Thanks, John. I mentioned earlier about the relationship across the value chain. Remote production is obviously dependent upon connectivity, and therefore we're seeing that coming out in the research as an investment category. And what you can see here is that the light blue columns are the overall industry, and the purple is where customers are looking at specific remote production projects. And you can see how the spend levels are very different. Thanks, John. And again, here we can see that the investment in the create part of the content chain model has a ripple effect to the store and connect parts of the BAM content chain. Thank you. So, having said that this was a simplified view, you can also see that remote production and remote workflows does add a layer of risk and complexity that wasn't there before. Thank you, John. And this is reflected in spend levels again. This chart depicts spend on security, content monitoring, test and measurement, and on-prem compute power. And again, you can see the difference in terms of the light blue, which is what the industry in general is spending, and then in the purple, the spend levels where people have dedicated remote production projects. Thanks, John. So, in summary, remote production, a trend accelerated by the pandemic, not a trend created by the pandemic. It fits in with broadcasters and content owners' desires for workflow efficiency and flexibility with lower costs. And our view is that remote production is here to stay for live events and sporting events for sure. So, thank you for your kind attention. I am now going to turn to our panel and go through a series of questions. But if you have a question yourself, please feel free to ask. So, Alison, coming to you first, is the research you've seen regarding investment and the areas of specific investment reflective of what you're experiencing in the marketplace?
Thanks, Darren. Well, Pebble really is more active in the published space of the BAM chain, and certainly in that area, I think I would agree that the areas of investment were true. So you were talking about there being growth in non-linear publishing, and certainly in the RFIs and the RFPs that we see, that is the case. We've also just launched a product in the Connect space, and absolutely I would say that there's a big demand really for IP connectivity, for people to be able to join those IP devices together. So our new product, Pebble Control, absolutely is geared towards doing that. And in terms of create and produce, I'm here to listen, to be honest, and also to have the opportunity to take my mask off because I'm on stage, which is obviously the big bonus of being on the panel. But yes, I'm interested to hear what the fellow panelists have to say about that. I mean, as an observer, I would absolutely say that is the case. I think back in 2017, 2018, there was the case study that NAP did in Australia about remote production. So it's clearly been a trend for a long time. And my sense is very much that this has accelerated what was already happening.
Raj, coming to you, obviously Mediaproxy is involved in compliance. Are you seeing spend levels reflected in your customers in that way?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of customers move to the cloud and streaming services. So in terms of the company, we're investing more on development for products for that. But like Alison, we're at the back end of the production workflow or even the output. So we're looking at distribution and contribution.
Okay, thank you. And Russell?
Yes, I'd say that we've seen quite a lot of extra interest in people trying to improve the quality of their remote productions. So Hitomi makes measurement of lip sync and timing alignments. And in the early days of the pandemic, it was a case of anything will do. We just need to go on air. But people now are a little bit intolerant of things being out of sync, and they're expecting things to look professional again. And so there's been a big increase in our products which measure that stuff. And we're working hard to bring new solutions to them, cloud-based stuff coming for the future, which will give them more ways of measuring.
And Duncan?
Yes.
A question to you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the other end of the scale because we specialise in central storage. That's what we do. So for us, when people don't work in an office, you kind of think that's the end of our business. But it really hasn't been. We've seen some really interesting developments in the way people are still using central storage and having to link to it externally. So I absolutely agree with you from the presentation. Remote production is definitely here to stay. It's just how do we, particularly as a storage provider, how do we integrate with that, and how do we really make people work better and smoother, working with these guys as well, and helping the environments that they work in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if I may, back to you, Alison. Do you agree that the pandemic created the need for remote production, or do you agree that the demand was there anyway and the pandemic just accelerated the trend to move to remote production?
Well, I mean, again, as an observer, I should say, I think clearly it accelerated remote production. I think initially, I would say probably everything stopped and we paused and production stalled a bit. But then once everything was reorganised and people, understood that they could go forward, it was remote or nothing. So, that absolutely things changed. I think one of the big reasons that is going to make it a sustainable change is sustainability itself. Are all those sustainability arguments around remote production, which I think are really compelling. I don't know if anybody else has got any commentary on that, but that seems to be one of the biggest reasons that things will carry on as they are.
And Raj, do you see that carrying on as they are?
I think so. I mean, we've always had web-based tools. So people setting up NOCs in their bedrooms to monitor what was the output of TV stations, we've seen that increase. We've also seen some of our customers are not going to allow engineering back into the building full time till the end of the year. So we see that this is an ongoing situation now, and I don't think it'll go back to normal. You know, people are saying that 2 days in the office, 3 days at home. So I think for us, this is the new normal sort of thing now.
Russell?
Yeah, I think picking up on that, it's a bit like people who are told you can't work at home pre-pandemic. There were a lot of people who were very traditional and very stayed in it. Pre-pandemic, there was, I think we mentioned the Australia situation. I think that was NEP who noticed that they were spending a lot of time flying their directors and their production staff over from one coast to another, and they could only get so much done because they spend a lot of their time flying. And then they put their remote production facility in the middle of the country, and they could have the same talent do a show in the morning and a show in the afternoon, whereas they could only do one every couple of days before. So they've got a huge increase in productivity. Okay, I mean, that's an interesting case for Australia being the country that it is. But over here, I think a bit like the firms who were saying, no, you've got to be in the office, they noticed that people could be more productive at home, that you could get more out of people with flexibility. And I think that's just as true in the broadcast world as it is in office-based work. If the talent can do more shows because they're not travelling, then that's got to be a good thing. So, yeah, I think it's definitely here to stay.
And Duncan, your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think the industry was heading a little bit that way anyway. I think people were sort of flirting with the idea of remote production and making cost savings and making it more efficient. But the pandemic massively accelerated it. And everyone just went into panic mode. Everyone had to go, we have to keep the business functioning. Especially as we all know, bearing in mind the pandemic sent everyone home, the consumption of content went up massively. Which meant, you know, there's going to be a glut, and that had a double whammy in terms of hitting us and hitting our industry. Absolutely. So it's here to stay, and it's got to be efficient, it's got to be agile, and it's got to be friendly to the people using it.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just in production as well. I mean, across the whole broadcast chain, everything's gone remote, hasn't it? You know, we had to pivot. Our customers in playout had to pivot overnight to be able to control and monitor and play out their channels from their homes as well, and of course, we had to be able to design and deliver and support those systems from home as well. So it goes much further than just production.
Yeah, I think, you know, people are seeing that the benefits of working from home or remotely, you know, and as you said, Russell, you know, the longer hours, I mean, there's no longer the hour's journey to the office. You know, you roll out of bed, breakfast, and you're working. I mean,
speak for yourself.
But people were doing longer days, you know, and but there lies the question: are you doing that to justify your existence, or are you actually working, you know, hard because you need to? But I think it's proved that working from home is no longer a hindrance, especially where for us, you know, we have a low latency product, so people could set up a 20-channel NOC in their own bedroom and monitor what was going on without loss of service. So,
yeah, but see, that's the thing, isn't it? With your low latency service, then that's a benefit. But obviously, there's a huge variable that no one really knows about and can't control, which is people's internet access.
yeah,
And then you're assuming everyone's got, you know, I mean, I live in a very small village in the middle of just above Newbury, and I went from 3.5 megabit to 300. And it was massively helpful just before the pandemic. But, you know, if I was trying to do remote production on something that slow, very, very painful indeed. And we don't control that, but we have to try and allow for it. And that's a challenge as well.
well, you see that. I mean, my wife volunteers for a charity for helping kids read, and the other day, our upload speed dropped, and she couldn't upload the books for the child at the other end to follow through with it. She was helping read. Mm-hmm. So that's the biggest issue, you know, and that's just normal life. But if you think for us, in the industry we're at, we need internet is the problem, not the remote working as such. It's, do we all have a reliable service at home to enable to work from home? And I think that's where we're sort of
We're,
falling down.
we're designing systems for people that we assume that they have got at
Yeah.
least decent enough internet.
Yeah, I think that's
You
what
know,
we've got to change.
You can download stuff fantastically, but if you have to make edits and changes and upload
Yeah.
it somewhere, then you could be sat there for hours waiting for content to get back to wherever it needs to go.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. For us, as I said, we've developed a low latency product so that everyone can set up a center at home. But it's the upload is the killer for everyone.
Yeah. I think we had a topic. We had a topic similar to this at BAM Live recently, and in the US at least, they're deploying 5G very rapidly, and Verizon have got some very good products that have enabled remote production to continue despite local variances in broadband and bandwidth issues. So I would imagine at some point the UK will get to that stage too, to be honest. I mean, we've touched on it, but in terms of the risk and complexity around remote working, Alison, if I could start with you again, you know, is Pebble helping to mitigate that in some way?
I mean, certainly in terms of new solutions, design of new solutions, I think probably one of the biggest perceived risks of remote working must be security. And I think that, you know, it's incumbent upon vendors to put security first as part of that, you know, in that piece. And that's absolutely what we've done with our Pebble Control product, this IP connection management tool. So I would say that, you know, that's the biggest risk that we would identify, or that end users may identify. In terms of, yeah, so that would be that, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And Raj?
Yeah, for us, we've invested in sort of the latest software development tools to ensure that what we're developing is right for the industry and especially in this new world. And also, we're not reliant on one operating system. You know, we say to everyone, don't be like the old days. Upgrade to, you know, have the latest patches installed, make sure everything is current. Because, you know, gone are the days when you were, you know, if you did an upgrade, oh, you've upgraded, you know, the software vendor would say, that's not allowed. So that's our biggest thing, is to make sure that our customers are at the latest patches. We're not reliant on any hardware. We're not reliant on, you know, an operating system. That's our thing about risk. And the tools we've developed, you know, we're now using ensure that.
Russell?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the previous point to link into it, I think there is a risk of too much reliance on public internet, because all of these remote tools work best when there is some level of guarantee of service. So the Australians that we spoke about earlier, they were doing mostly things over a private network or guaranteed bandwidth with the providers. The using internet for everything really came as a result of the pandemic, because that's all we had. I think the way forward is for agreements with the broadband providers and with the telecom people to have some sort of guarantee of service if you're doing a broadcast, which they can do. It's just they don't like doing it.
Duncan?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually, in making sure that we've, you know, got that infrastructure there to support what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. And your point earlier about the security aspect of it is, you know, it is making sure that whatever travels is secure. You know, some of the content is really, really sensitive. And do you really want that travelling around? No, I don't think so. I mean, I've been to a couple of places in the US where they not only have they got an air gap, but they've actually got parts of the building you're not allowed to go into. So how can that ever be done remotely? It can't, which is going back to this whole hybrid thing. That there are certain tasks that have to be done in the office or in the head office or the main production area, and there are others that can be done remotely. And it depends which part of the production you're in as well, you know, because some of it can be transmitted, some of it can't. You know, having teams working together, sometimes that doesn't need to be done. So there's a whole host of things. But security is obviously a major concern for a lot of people too.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree, Duncan. Sorry, Simon, have we got more questions from the floor?
Saying that in those 3 months, technology had advanced by 3 years in 3 months. I think some of you have already probably covered this anyway, but do you see technology advancing at that rate, or have we plateaued and we're going to rest on our laurels?
I think that's a good question because it's very similar to my next one as well, actually, which was in terms of what is the future for remote working and will it continue to go, I guess, at the pace that it did at the beginning? Alison.
Well, what I was going to say to your point, actually, Simon, was I don't know the technology advanced, but the adoption certainly advanced, didn't it? So we were forced into a situation where these look like the right solutions, let's go for it and give it a go, and that did work. I think in the future, we're going to be looking at more choice, more options, more methods of taking the signal to the public cloud, getting it back down again, lower latency. It will be enhancements and improvements, as the months go by. And I think probably we're already seeing that, absolutely. Needs must. And so this is probably one of the most compelling the most compelling set of external events we've had, and it really has forced things on. Across the whole broadcast chain, as I said before, things really have moved. So I think it's been an interesting time in many ways.
Yeah, I think, Alison, you just said it. It's adoption rather than technology improvements. I think we've all had the technology, but how quickly have the customers been keen to adopt? And I think they've had to adopt, and take on board what's going on. For us as technology providers, we've always been looking into the future, and not just a few years ahead, but long-term planning. And I think that's always been there for us. We've always said, well, you can work from home, and people have gone, what? Suddenly it's a case of, that product you have that allows us to do this, can we have it, please? Suddenly so I think customers have to understand that we as technology providers, it's there. Do you want to buy into this and not stay behind of this blinkered look of, we work from facilities, not from home?
Right, that's an interesting point. I mean, Russell, would you agree with that?
Yes, indeed. Looking back at the pandemic, people who work in live broadcasts are immensely imaginative folks. Particularly the engineers came up with some incredible solutions just to stay on air. With all sorts of cobbled together bits of equipment you really weren't designed to be worked that way, which was really quite impressive. And yeah, that led to some innovations which were great. But yeah, I think the point that the technology which maybe struggled to get adopted earlier is being thought of quite seriously now. When we say to somebody, yeah, you can line up 4 cameras and those 4 cameras can be coming down 4 completely different feeds and different places, they go, oh yeah, I like that now. Whereas we struggled slightly before these things came along to find people interested in that. So yeah, but I think the actual pace of change is going to slow because there's nothing like being in a war or being in a dire straits to get people's imaginations fired up. And it's kind of a relief now that we're not in the emergency situation anymore. We can slow down a wee bit, but yeah, hopefully improve the quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the point that they made about the sort of 3 years and 3 months scenario, or 3 months and 3 years, I should say, whichever around it is. It was a commercial aspect as well. There was a business driver there for the companies to still get this stuff out. They had to get the content out. So there was a driver there definitely to push that technology rapidly forward. I think everyone had been dabbling a bit anyway because, it's some of those things you want to be able to offer. Because before it was people working from home, it was probably satellite offices that want similar technology that you can deliver something centrally that you can, plot across the world, maybe different offices in different countries working together. But now it's people working from their homes rather than a satellite office. So the technology was there and definitely being dabbled with, but the pandemic undoubtedly pushed it rapidly forward. Yeah.
And Simon, I believe there's another question.
This is a bit of a crystal ball one, really. And it's particularly relevant with the summer games starting. Where do you see the outside broadcast vehicle being parked in 2 years' time?
Who wants to take that, guys?
It's a tricky one, that, because the traditional OB van, the big OB vans, are designed to have the gallery within them. So they're designed to house people. And the OB van of the future is just going to be an equipment thing which a few specialist engineers will plug things into. So you won't have the director sitting in it, you won't have the vision mixer sitting into it. Probably means a smaller truck. They'll still have to go to the venues, they'll still have to go to the places because the camera feeds are going to go back and a certain amount has to be done in the truck. But you won't need the enormous expanding sides that we've seen of the big trucks of old.
So does it become like an SNG for news? You know, your OB truck stops being a proper, full-blown outside broadcast truck and it just becomes a small news gathering facility that you then just pump back to base.
It'll be an OB pod.
Yeah.
Where people gets plumbed in and then remotely operated like a drone.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes it much more agile if it comes down to that scale as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Much more reactive.
I mean, you think if you take Sky, what is it, 34 cameras to a football game? And all, you know, the graphics, everything else that goes with it. Suddenly, yes, you've got 34 remote cameras, directors based back at Osterley, and everything is just compressed down to...
I mean, to be fair, that might actually open up the opportunity to have more events covered because you've got smaller deployments. So if you're looking at a small drop pod, if you like, and then it's just plumbed in remotely operated, you know, it could offer a lot more events being covered, which would be great.
Very much so.
I guess depends on what the venue is. This came up in BAM Live as well. So a lot of football stadiums, for example, have their own connectivity. So they may not need an OB truck, let's be clear, because they have their connectivity. Whereas if you look at a live sport like Extreme E, that is deliberately in the middle of nowhere as part of the raison d'etre of their series, then they're going to need a lot of OB help in order to get those signals out from where they are. Especially as they call it a media-first product, because they're not held in stadiums or racetracks where there is a physical audience, right? So it has to be a media-first
point A, point
product.
B, and just whichever way they go, they have to be filmed. A lot of drones.
Yeah. Any more questions, Simon? Okay, so maybe my last question, really, Alison. Have you got anything in your R&D locker, you think, that you want to share with us of the future of what Pebble is up to, and also whether that's relevant to remote production?
I could tell you, but I have to kill you. No, I mean, one of the things that we were talking about beforehand was orchestration, and that is definitely an area that we're interested in. And by orchestration, I would say we're talking about, you know, taking multiple devices or multiple steps within the capability of a device and making it look like a single solution. And I think that's something that's relevant for remote production. It's relevant for playout. It's relevant across the field. And I think certainly that's something that we're looking at in the future. But having just launched Pebble Control, we're certainly very interested in looking at the whole IP connection management, the IP routing and switching space, and understanding, you know, where we could take that and where that gap is. That was a product that was really born out of identifying a gap in the EBU tech pyramid. So there's you've probably seen the EBU technical pyramid where they talk about which IP 2110 devices are available and where there is still a gap. And we definitely noticed a gap in the joining things together space. And whilst at the moment there are enterprise solutions which can be, you know, configured and designed at great expense to do that, there isn't really anything that's enabling the smaller operations like production facilities or indeed small OB vans to go all IP, and that's really where we're aiming that product. So we're looking forward to seeing how we can take that forward.
Great, Raj?
For us, we're not seeing the demise of SDI, but more demand for 2110, 2022. So offering support for those sources now is our biggest going forward. We see a lot of that, a lot of cloud playout, and lots of people asking for pop-up channels. So they don't want to pay for compliance and logging continuously, but they have a pop-up service coming up. So being able to offer customers just a pop-up channel, and that's a big thing now as well. So for us, moving into 2110 is a big thing, and pop-up services for streaming. Also self-regulation, so people, like, as we were talking earlier about esports and things, where people want to have a safe channel where children can go. So we're developing tools that allow streaming services before have never had logging and monitoring to be able to monitor what's going on. So that for us, that's the future.
Russell?
We get quite a lot of talk. People talk about low latency links and things like that, and how long does it take. We get asked all the time, I would really like to know how long it takes a signal to get from one place to another. So we're working on that. We've got something new, which you can see down at the show here. We're actually going to measure latency. So you will know exactly how long it takes a signal to get from one side of the world to the other, be that audio or video or both. And it's an interesting departure, which goes hand in hand with remote production, because you need to know time of flight, as well as audio relative to the video or the audio to audio. So yes, we've got new stuff coming along for that.
Duncan?
Yeah, so certainly from our point of view, the storage point of view, we've actually recently announced version 1 of our Unify Hub, which we've been developing in beta now for about 3-4 months. And it's a tool that works within our storage or an appliance and actually talks to other servers. But the main thing is being able to bring cloud storage into our storage and then reshare on premise, so it's accessible locally as if it's a local share, and also be able to take local storage, ours or someone else's, for those people who don't own GB Labs already. We can then push that out as an S3 compliant export, which then it can be then read by online services that need S3 access. And also bolted onto that is our remote working software, which is installed on the client, allows them to access the storage as if it's in the office. So it feels very familiar to the users, but they can cache locally and they can edit locally, even 4K quite happily, with the full footage, not proxy. So, you know, it does make people who are editing high-end content or working with high-end content a little more comfortable because they get a full res view. So that's where we're approaching it. And it's been received really, really well, actually. So, yeah, interesting times, definitely.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? Yes, sir. The gentleman, I think, asked about how long will OB trucks actually be in existence? Is it the technology that will eradicate them, or is it the service? You got that? Okay, cool. So, as I say, for me at least, it's all about whatever is the cheapest fit for purpose route tends to win. So, as I was saying, I think a lot of football stadiums in the UK have their own connectivity. I can see that they're going to go that way. No, but some clubs and stadiums do elsewhere in Europe and APAC. So I think as a trend, that's going to go that way. Personally speaking, I don't know if anyone else has a view.
Yeah, I think it depends on the value of the content. So the more premium the event, the more likely it is that you're going to have a really high production value for it. And that's going to require UHD cameras, and it's going to require a lot of cameras, a lot of immersive audio, and that all needs to be put in a truck usually. Whereas if you've got a less premium sport, which doesn't command such a big audience, and the advertising rights aren't so high, then that tends to be done more on a budget. And then it'll be, yes, you could do that as remote productions with just a few cameras. You really see the difference in the football coverage, for example. The Premier League, they will put a huge amount of effort into that. As I said, sometimes 30 cameras for a big game. But you get something like the not very televised lower leagues. It tends to be 2 or 3 camera shoot, and that's all done remote production. So yeah, it depends on the value of the content.
I think in terms of football, as soon as clubs are allowed to have their own, the content becomes their own. At the moment, it's governed by Sky as a whole. But I think once football becomes, you know, the club owns the content, you'll see change and rapid change. And that's when OBs and things will start moving away from being those fast sessions.
Do you think that's what's going to happen, that ultimately all clubs will own their own content?
I think so. It's going that way, isn't it? Or the Premier League will own it, and it won't be as soon as we can, I think as soon as we as football fans can watch our club's games every day on telly, at the moment, you know, you're restricted, aren't you? Sky are not, I'm a Southampton supporter, Sky don't show Southampton very often. So, but as soon as Southampton TV is broadcasting and, you know, it's not linear, but it's on stream, then I think the remote productions come into it completely. It changes completely. The outlook goes away, you know.
There is another driver to touch on Russell's point, is that some channels, some streaming services are, certainly in Holland, are experimenting with UHD. So if they see that they can make more money out of additional subscribers with UHD, they will bear the extra cost of that and therefore OB trucks. So again, it's linked back to the business case. But I agree with Russell that UHD could be a technology and a subscriber differentiator that could continue to see OB trucks deployed in that sense. Simon, one more question?
Just one last one. Off topic completely, just probably because Darren probably wants to wind up soon, but you're all manufacturers, and there's been a lot of talk over the last year about the value of trade shows. We're here at the KitPlus Show. Maybe how nice is it to actually see real people again?
Very nice. I can confirm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the huge benefits of coming to a trade show is the sheer value of bumping into people and having those random conversations, making sort of serendipitous associations, meetings with people, pushing things forward that you weren't expecting to be able to progress on that particular day. So much as I've been, in fact, as a company, we have gone to being a remote working company and we haven't really seen each other very much, to actually get into a forum like this where people are delighted to chat today. You know, you're having much more meaningful conversations for much longer than we really normally would have at trade shows, I would think. It's been great, and, you know, bring it on, I would say. I would say, obviously, as a vendor, that we've all questioned the value of the big trade shows over the past 18 months. You know, some of us have seen no difference or perhaps an increase in our pipelines despite not having been to any of the major trade shows. So there's definitely an ROI debate to be had, and the justification really needs to be made to be going to these things. But sure enough, our sales guys are desperate to get out there and do them again. And you know, I mean, I love trade shows, so I'll always turn up to one. But you know, I think it's time for the industry to question why we do each one, what the ROI is to us, and also what the ROI is to a customer of attending a trade show, and to perhaps adjust what we do at each individual trade show in order to bear that in mind. But no, today's been great, actually. It's really good to be out.
Yeah, no, for us, I mean, our HQ is Australia, so we all work remotely anyway. But coming here was just, it's fantastic to be back, meeting people, not just friends and everything, but just even talking to customers face to face. You know, we're all zoomed out, we're all teamed out, but actually talking to people and having that longer discussion, even Alison, Matt and I just standing for 30 minutes just chatting, you know, that was really good. I think for the future, again, as Alison said, you have to question the big trade shows. I think little regional ones, I think happy to get involved with those. I'm not still sure about the big NAB, IBC thing yet. Let's see what happens next year. But this year, it's a bit scary still. Yeah.
Well, for me, it's great to be back. Talking to people seems to be like a lost skill that I put in the cupboard. Yeah, to your point, we're all zoomed out, and it beats the hell out of Zoom, actually seeing people face to face. And it's been nice to be outside, and being able to take the mask off outside has been fantastic. I look forward to another big trade show. I think they're valuable because you get a mixture of ideas, and you see what your competitors are up to. Keeps you on your toes. I think they have a value. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. It's so nice to get out and about. And this is the furthest I've travelled since February 2020. So having come from Reading, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't know the scale of how bad my travel was. But yeah, it's been great to be out. It really has. And I think one of the things that we find particularly as a company over the last sort of 10, 12 years of attending trade shows with our products of the storage product is how many ideas we get from our customers and people on the stands and people come to see us and they're going, do you know, it'd be really good if you could do this. And you think, well, actually, that's quite good. And you wouldn't get that from a Zoom call. You wouldn't get that from just a general chat or going to the beach and having a natter at IBC with people and discussing what's happening. You just don't get that, and I think that's invaluable. The human element is absolutely invaluable. Yeah. It's been great.
I think I would answer your question in two ways, Simon. Firstly, I think what the pandemic has given us is a slightly different event model, which we're trialling here today at KitPlus with the hybrid model, with the content being streamed out at the same time. And I think that's a good thing because I think inevitably you will hit a wider audience and you'll get more people involved. But I think it also addresses the issue that many broadcasters have had and will continue to have reviews on spending and attending trade shows. And I think the people that can't go to trade shows will still be able to benefit from the content generated at trade shows, which I think is a key element going forward. The second answer is really more of a personal one. I just appreciate the opportunity to wear something other than T-shirt and shorts. So thank you for that. I think on that note, we'd better wrap this panel up. My thanks to the audience. Thank you so much for your time and patience, and your questions are excellent. And thank you to my panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you.